Hello. Today we begin our conversation about working with triangles. And so we will define triangles, explain what basic elements of triangles are, and we'll bring basic symbols that describe those elements. And I would like you to begin with trying to draw your own definition of a triangle. I'm going to give you 3 little hints. They are right in front of you. Each of these 3 shapes is not a triangle for just one single reason. If you identify this reason and include it in your definition, then you probably will do a pretty good job. I'm going to help you just a bit with the beginning of the sentence, and then I'm going to ask you to pause this video and write your definition in your notebook. Let's compare our results. A triangle is, I say, a closed figure that is flat, that is based on the first example, that has exactly 3 sides based on the second example, and these sides must be line segments, so they must be straight based on the third example. Well, now that we agreed on our definitions, let's continue with defining positions and proper symbols used to identify triangles and basic elements of triangles. So you already see a triangle in front of you, and we'll have to give a name to it. We use vertices to name triangles, and when we say them, we don't use the word and. In other words, I cannot say that this triangle is F, D, and R. Instead, I'm going to use a symbol of a triangle, and I'm going to name vertices one after another. I could use any order I want, and this rule is only true for triangles, not for shapes with more than 3 sides. So FDR is one way to name this triangle. FRD is another way if I want to go in the opposite direction. And a third, but not last, possibility is RDF, which implies that I picked a different vertex to begin the name with. Please understand that when you name your triangle, and I'm gonna highlight it so everybody sees it, RDF, it doesn't mean that when you're drawing it by these 3 vertices, you're stopping right here. You have to remember that your shape is closed. It might seem as an obvious fact, but it's not so. I've seen many mistakes people make, so I'm not making the assumption that everybody was clear on that. Well, let's continue. Let's talk about proper names of sides. You see that I'm pointing at a side whose name is FD. I could also name this side DF. And when I write those names, I will use this little symbol on top, like a hat, that indicates that the side should be a line segment. Straight element, portion of a line that has a definite beginning and definite end. And I mentioned a reversed name of that segment because it really doesn't matter which letter will begin its name, D or F. But you cannot name a side as F and D. If you write or say something like that, it simply means that you're mentioning either letters or two vertices that have nothing to do with actual sides or a side that you discuss. Now, let's talk about proper way of referring to an angle. So you see I'm pointing at angle, or in other words, vertex R of my triangle. And when I talk about angles, I cannot any longer use a segment symbol. And so I will write the name of angle R exactly like you see it on your screen. And you should be able to do that on your own. When I am naming angle R, I have to indicate on the diagram that I understand where it is. And to do that, we use these little kind of curves. It draws everybody's attention to the location at the vertex of interest. So when it comes to angles, a single letter notation is not the only way to determine what you're talking about. We also can use a three-letter notation. In that case, you have to make sure that you still use a symbol of an angle and that you still mention the vertex of interest. And that vertex must be in the middle, right between the two other vertices. You can't really make a mistake with what other vertices, because what's left are just vertices F and D on the other side. So to complete this name, I will mention both of them. It's also not important to follow the order. I could go counterclockwise and name it FRD, or I could go clockwise and name the same angle as angle DRF, but I have to make sure that vertex around which I placed my curve, the vertex of interest, is still in the middle of that name. If I name this angle something like RFD, then it will be a totally different angle with the vertex at F. I'm actually going to highlight it in blue so you see how different this information would be. So RFD means that I'm talking about angle RFD right here. And as you see, clearly it's very different from what I have originally. So let's remove it since it's wrong. And when you take your notes, please include this example of possible mistakes so that you can avoid it. Now, I'm going to pause this video to give you an opportunity to check your own understanding. I'm going to ask you to write a one-letter notation for angle D and at least one three-letter notation for the same angle. So pause the video and we will meet in a second. Okay, before we compare results, notice that I marked my angle D with curves, but this time not with a single curve, but with a double one. We do that to indicate that we know the location of the vertex of interest, and we know that it's not congruent or not the same measure as another angle that already has been marked on the diagram. Very important. We cannot assume that angles are equal just because they look equal on the diagram. That fact actually has to be stated in one way or another. So once again, a different number of curves on the angle that is different from another angle not equal to it on the same diagram. So let's compare the results. One letter notation for angle D must include an angle symbol Make sure you had that. D is the vertex. Therefore, when you write a three-letter notation, D must be in between two other vertices, F and R. And of course, you can name it in reversed order. That is all in regards to marking your triangle with basic elements and writing those facts in symbols. We will only add one more fact. Sometime in earlier grades, you studied a theorem that states what the sum of all three angles of a triangle is. It is always 180 degrees, but I would like to make sure that everybody knows how to write this fact, not in words, but sort of in a short way, kind of in symbols. So to do that, we will use this notation. Take a look. Angle F, we're already familiar with that, but what is this little m in front of it? Actually, this little letter m stands for measure. So in other words, I'm saying that measure of angle F, whatever it might be, plus measure of angle D, plus measure of the third angle, R, in our diagram, will equal 180 degrees. And that is one of those equations that we will be using really often in this course. That is all.